Well, we're checking in with Dub Nation again. We've talked to Bob Myers and now got to track down Steve Kerr here. And so, Steve, obviously sports is normally the toy department of life, and the real world is all over us and all of our current situations. So we'll do a little bit of what's going on currently in the world and then get into a little diversion in terms of basketball and entertainment and have a conversation maybe to take people's minds off their current situation for just a little while. Give me an idea of what you're doing, how your family's doing, where you're hanging out, how you're handling things right now in the world.
Sure. Well, we are in San Diego. This is kind of our home base where the kids grew up. We kept our house here when I took the Warriors job. And so we have congregated here. It's a better spot to be quarantined just because we have more space and there's fewer people around. And so it's easier to practice the social distancing that we're all trying to figure out. So I've got all three kids here with my wife and me, and we're just following the instructions of all the health experts and trying to be responsible. And in the meantime, just enjoying each other's company and shifting into this brand new quiet life that everybody has had to shift to. It's very strange. Obviously, we're very lucky. We're healthy, and we're able to live a life where we're not worried about food or paying the bills or anything. So we recognize that that's an issue for a lot of people. So within the context of everything that's going on, we know we're very lucky, and we're trying to enjoy the time together.
To that end, Bob Myers, yourself, Rick Welts, Steph Curry, you're big, message senders in terms of people pay attention to what you have to say. And give me your feedback on Steph and Dr. Anthony Fauci's Q&A, which people still can get onto YouTube and see that link. Is that information is power here, and it clears up a lot of misunderstandings and how, as a society, we can best handle things. What do you think about Steph and Dr. Fauci and kind of their Q&A and the information it kind of imparted really to a lot of people around the world?
I thought it was fantastic, and it didn't surprise me because Steph is so socially aware, and he uses his platform for such good deeds, doing so many different things, feeding school kids and trying to keep people educated. And so to bring Dr. Fauci on with him, and I think there were at least 50,000 people watching live as I read it, and then so many more have watched it since then on YouTube. Steph was just doing his part to try to educate everybody, because that's what it takes right now. The younger generation especially, because they're all restless and they want to get out of the house and go do stuff. It was really important for them to hear from Steph and Dr. Fauci and to hear those recommendations. So it was fantastic.
Let's divert to Warrior basketball a little bit, and a couple housekeeping notes for Warrior fans and people who have tickets to games and season ticket holders. As soon as we have any clarity on the NBA, we, the Warriors, will be reaching out to you directly. So it's one of those where the season has not been postponed or canceled. It's suspended, and we're on pause right now, and there are really no good answers until we really have a timeline for the world and how we go about our business. But as soon as we get that info, we will share it with everybody. So with that out of the way, Steve, when we talk about this season, the word productive comes up a lot. That wins and losses, clearly not where anybody wanted. The injuries, the roster turnover, but there was some productive moments and productive things that happened for you and your staff and the players. When you say productive this year, tell people kind of what you're referring to and some of the things you've gleaned from a pretty rough season overall.
Well, I think the biggest thing we're trying to do is develop players for the future, both short-term and long. And so when you have a season like this where everything goes wrong and you've got injuries and the record is bad and you're struggling, it's the smaller battles that you try to win. And those battles really are about player development and culture and incorporating guys into your system, into your team, to your organization and teaching them what it's about, to be a member of the Warriors. And I thought from that standpoint, it was a really good season, a productive one. That's the right term, because you saw the growth of our rookies. For example, Eric Paschall had a terrific year. Jordan Poole really came along towards the end of the season, and the two-way contributions of Kai Bowman and Juan Toscano-Anderson, Mike Mulder at the end of the year. That was all really good stuff. And then I think Marquise Chris projects to be a really important player for us long term. And so to use this season to help those guys to develop, see their individual careers start to blossom, and it's easy to picture them helping us next year when we get healthy. I think that's what this year has been about.
I never asked you during the year, just on planes and bumping into you, what was it, in terms of the difference for you when you have your David West, Sean Livingston, Andre Iguodala, Zaza Pachulia versus a 20-year-old Jordan Poole or a 23-year-old Marquise and 23-year-old Paschall? Your run with the Warriors and all the finals runs, there weren't a lot of 20-somethings, like super young guys that were young in life, let alone their NBA careers. How did that affect maybe how you communicated with them or reached out to them, or maybe put up with some of the bumps in the road just because they're youngsters?
I think the biggest thing for me, Fitzy, was to understand that I needed to be more detailed than ever before in every practice. And so I really leaned on my staff, on Mike Brown in particular, who has coached some very young teams in the NBA, Ron Adams, who's seen it all. I leaned on those guys for advice on pacing the team, on what practice should look like, the things we needed to go over. And I think as the season went on, we got a better and better feel and a better vibe for, what each player needed, what our team needed. The last 5 years, let's face it, we've been spoiled. We've had all those veteran guys you mentioned, along with a core group that has stayed together. So they've always known exactly where they stood, where they fit together, what they needed to do. So at times they kind of ran on autopilot. But this year there was much more teaching, much more detail every single day.
I think one of your strengths, and I've said this publicly, is that, you saw the Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson relationship, the Tim Duncan, Greg Popovich relationship. So you were informed in terms of how stars and head coaches maybe need to interact. But your own personal experience, from the Cavs to the Bulls to the Spurs to a guy who was not the all-star or the star, you've always had empathy and great respect for the last 5 or 6 guys on your roster. And this year, more than ever, you mentioned Juan Toscano-Anderson and Kai Bowman. The year Damian Lee had, I could see you kind of saying, all right, this team isn't elite yet, but these grinders that are giving me all that they have in the last 5 or 6 spots on the bench, I think you took some joy and some real purpose in how you emboldened those guys and gave them confidence and got the most out of them. I mean, is that a fair observation in terms of, the stars and your Draymond and Steph and Clay and Durant's and other guys? Okay, there's coaching to that, but the last 5, 6 guys on any team are so critical. And I think that's, one of your real strengths in building the Warriors and the success the team has had.
Well, I appreciate it. I've always related to those guys because that's kind of who I was in my own career. I was, never more than the 7th man on a roster, and I was frequently the 11th or 12th guy on a roster. And so I had to learn how to survive. And I always appreciated it when I had coaches who communicated and helped me grow and helped me survive and deal with the disappointment of not playing and that sort of thing. So I definitely relate to those guys, and I'm also blessed because the stars allow me to do that because of the culture that they've helped form. I mean, coaching Steph Curry, I say it all the time, he reminds me so much of Tim Duncan. Steph allows for everything in this organization to function smoothly. And so, he's helped build the culture, and it's largely been built around his joy and his energy, and it just fills every corner of this organization, and the younger guys feel it. And so then I'm able to sort of take those last 5 or 6 guys you're talking about, encourage them, work with them, and then point at Steph and go, you see that guy? That's how you work. And then Steph's there every day to bring the energy and the humor and the joy. And that's why this thing works as it does. And so we're very lucky to have the personnel that we do and the stars that we do.
This is kind of a bigger picture question when we look at where basketball is. And I think the Rockets have pushed the edge of the envelope on let's shoot 100 threes in the game and have the math work and all that. Do you see, and I'm thinking of Eric Paschal in particular on this, is the game going to change to the point where right now we need 4 3-point shooters, maybe you can have 1 non-shooter. If you have a big that can stretch the floor, he's even more valuable. What about the days of maybe posting up a guy, drawing a double team and passing to the open man? Are we going to still be in that switching defense, everybody shooting threes? And you see any curvature to where the league is headed, or is that really the style that the NBA is going to have even for the next couple of years?
I think it's trending more and more every year towards more shooting from every position.
Okay.
But the one thing I will always remember is our Game 7 in Houston a couple of years ago when they missed 28 straight 3-point shots. And, meanwhile, Kevin and Steph were hitting one mid-range pull-up after another.
Right.
And, in the playoffs, the mid-range shot is the one you're going to get because defenses are so in tune with everything you're trying to do. They're going to take away the layups. They're going to take away the 3-point shots as best they can. And the one that's always there is the mid-range shot. And so I don't think you want to make it a steady diet. You still want to shoot a lot of threes. You want to get to the line. You want to get layups. But it has to be part of who you are. And that's why when Eric Paschal was making 15 to 17-foot shots off the dribble all year long, I loved it. I think that's an important shot to have. It's more difficult to post up than ever before because of the defensive rules. But I think sort of posting up at the foul line area allows for more space. And that's where you saw Andrew Wiggins and Eric Paschal kind of work from this year, especially, the last month or so of the season. Those guys really started to attack, and we, spread the floor with shooters, and then they'd either get to the rim or pull up and shoot a little jumper. I think that's all going to be still a very crucial part of the game.
Now, one of the differences with the season on pause is that normally with all these extended playoff runs, I know you talk to Bob, daily, but there wasn't time for you to drill down on video of draft prospects. Obviously in your career, player, general manager, broadcaster, head coach. This time I know that Bob had sent you video of various scouts. There's a lot more conversation about draft picks. Obviously the Warriors are going to have a very high pick and 2 second-rounders. What have you done during this downtime to familiarize yourself with the draft and looking at video cut-ups of the various prospects and how the scouts have rated different guys? This has got to be a different year for you draft-wise than previous years.
It's totally different. Basically the last 5 years, I've just shown up on draft night and wondered who all these guys were. I had no feel whatsoever because during the finals, that's when the draft workouts were going on. I was busy, and so this year it's been a lot of fun. I'm watching all these prospects. I watch 2 or 3 games every day. So we've got a list. Bob's given me a list of 8 or 10 guys, and I'm writing up reports and my thoughts on these guys. And so I'm enjoying being part of the process, and it gives me an even greater appreciation for what our front office and our scouts do, because it's not an easy job, but it's an exciting one. And especially this year, given that we're going to have a very high pick, and there are a lot of really good players to choose from. So we're excited about that, and I'm enjoying being part of the process.
Now, when you look at the guys under contract and really the building blocks of the roster right now, and I did this with Bob, is that, if you say Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, and let's say Marquise or Looney at the 5, depending on what you're thinking about, to me, then you start to look at your Damian Lee and Mulder and Smailagic and Paschal and Jordan Poole, but maybe backup point guard and backup 3 and maybe another big. Is that kind of a fair assessment in terms of a wish list if you were looking at free agency, draft, trade exception, that kind of stuff? Are those the areas maybe you're focused on even more?
I think the one thing we're always focused on, Fitzy, is the two-way players,
Okay.
regardless of position, because the league has largely become positionless. You've got point guards and centers, and then a whole bunch of guys, like say Andre Iguodala or Klay Thompson or Kawhi Leonard, whoever you want to say, who's basically 2, 3, 4. It doesn't really matter. Somebody who can shoot threes, who can guard multiple spots, can handle the ball, make decisions. So the more of those guys on your roster, the better. And when you watch the playoffs the last couple of years, you see the best teams playing this year when they would go head to head. Whether it's Toronto, Boston, Lakers, Clippers, they're all throwing all these multi-skilled, versatile players with size out on the floor, and the position really didn't matter that much. And so for me, I think it's best you got to take the best guys available, and with an eye towards versatility, because that's where the game's heading.
Do you need a little more veteran presence on the team, do you think, in terms of if you were shopping for free agents, that this team has skewed pretty young now? I mean, obviously Steph and Klay and Draymond, there's your 30-something guys, but there isn't a lot of other old heads down the roster. Right. Is that something you're just like, give me a couple of vets that might teach you, Smiley's not quite ready, Jordan Poole not quite ready necessarily for your game 6s or game 7s, but maybe a couple of vets could kind of help along the way. Is that kind of a fair observation?
Very, very much so. And, we needed another veteran this year, and we were very young, but some of it was just because of Steph's injury. When he went down, we had expected him obviously to be our captain and, he and Draymond to really lead the team. But when Steph went out and missed all that time, it left Draymond as one of the only leaders on the team and vets, and I think you need multiple leaders. You need guys who can mentor the younger players, and so I think it'll be important for us to add a guy or two next year who can help in that regard.
All right, so this is one I haven't run by you, but it's something I'm already looking forward to in terms of the next chapter of the Warriors story. Is that if you study NBA history, the dynasty teams, Steve, normally fall off a cliff and they're not heard from for a long period of time. And even the Lakers this year, which they would have made the playoffs, or they still may, this would be 6 straight lottery years for the Lakers before they bubbled back up. And if you go to the Bulls teams, which you were on after the Last Dance, and we'll get to that in a second, but after the Last Dance, Chicago was very fallow for a while, even the great Celtics teams. This Warrior team sustained this year, but has a chance to bounce right back up into a playoff contending type of team. And that would be very different than a lot of other dynasty teams in NBA history. You ever think about that? Or with everything that went on this year, like, I can't wait for next year because it's not 5 years away from being a playoff team. I mean, that's a goal, and that's a title contention thing as early as next season.
Well, it's a little early to mention being that good. We got a lot to improve upon, but just getting Steph and Klay healthy again, bringing back the group of players who developed, seeing them with Andrew and with Eric Paschall and Marquise Chris, seeing that whole group together is going to be a lot of fun. And I think we'll have a draft pick, a high draft pick as well. But the whole key is the core. And if you look at any group in NBA history, I was a Laker fan in the 80s, and they were good the entire decade of the 80s. And it was because, Magic and Kareem were there the entire time. Worthy was there most of the time. So looking at Steph, Klay, Draymond, those guys have been great for a long time. And it looks to me like they're still going to be really good, maybe great for the next several years. We could have a decade-long run at this thing, which is really exciting. And it's a testament to just how good our core players are.
Speaking of core players, I mean, have you maintained communication with guys up and down the roster and your staff and stuff? Do you have a list of, today I'm going to call Q and today I'm going to call Jaron and tomorrow I'm going to call Steph? I mean, are you kind of doing a tickler list of just Warrior people you want to stay in communication with on a regular basis?
Yeah, a lot of texting, and we had a conference call as a coaching staff on Monday. We're gonna make those weekly, a Zoom conference just like this one, where we get the entire staff together. We've had a couple of projects for them to work on, free agency scouting, because we'll be looking at free agents whenever free agency starts, and so we want to get everybody's opinion on different players. And but there's only so much you can do, because the league is just not operating right now. Everybody's pretty much at home and waiting this thing out. So I've tried to maintain some contact with the players through text and calls, and it just it's just a weird time, because there's not a whole lot to talk about, and we're all just kind of trying to do our part and wait this thing out.
Now, you participated in the Last Dance documentary series about, the final, ending of the Chicago Bulls era. And you were part of the Spurs era, which still never ended after 22 straight playoff seasons and 5 championships. And you're part of the Warrior dynasty. And we're going to be doing 30 for 30s on the Warriors 10 years from now, 20 years from now as well. The only positive out of all this is they've moved up the Last Dance now to April instead of June. So we don't have to wait to watch it, because as a basketball fan and a Chicago native, and originally, I am so waiting for this. I'm going to watch it multiple times. Is there any commonality, Bulls, Spurs, Warriors? Like, do you see any threads of extended runs of success with those 3 different editions? Because, Steve, you might be the most uniquely qualified person to speak on all 3 of them, because you were intimately involved in all 3 of them.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of crazy to think about the fact that I've been involved in all 3. The common thread 100% comes down to the star players involved. You talk about Michael Jordan, Tim Duncan, Steph Curry. You're talking about probably the greatest player of all time in Michael, greatest power forward of all time in Tim, greatest shooter of all time in Steph.
Right.
Each one with very unique qualities as leaders. And then the peripheral stars, the Bulls had Pippen and Grant and Rodman. The Spurs with Ginobili, Parker, David Robinson. Warriors with Draymond and Clay and Andre. That's the common thread is incredible superstars who established a culture, and then great supporting casts that provided two-way basketball. Those Bulls teams, those Spurs teams, and our Warriors teams all were among the very best defensive teams in the league, and were great on offense as well. So that's the common thread. It's about the character and the quality of the star players and what that meant to each organization.
I know you'll probably speak about it with The Last Dance, but the psychotic competitiveness of Jordan, to the point where there were physical altercations at practice, which obviously you were aware of, but the selflessness of Duncan and Steph, in that they weren't maniacal, I guess, overtly. The competitiveness was still at that level, but they were more of the everyman superstar, where Michael was a global icon at the very beginning of it. I mean, is that maybe what makes that Bulls Last Dance a little different than the Spurs and the Warriors?
Yeah, I think Michael was so maniacally competitive, and the fact that he took that couple of years away from the game, in the middle of his career, to go play baseball and to kind of recharge his batteries. I think he came back so motivated, and that'll be a big part of the show, I'm sure, the documentary, which I'm looking forward to seeing. 22 years is a long time. I don't even remember what happened with a lot of that stuff. So I'm looking forward to it too. But now the competitive desire part is, I think, really important to mention because you don't win and sustain winning without being incredibly competitive. And Michael, our Michael is Draymond.
Yeah.
Draymond's one of the most competitive people I've ever seen in my life. But so is Steph, in a much different way. So was Tim Duncan in a very different way. But the fire has to burn for all these teams, and it has to stay lit for a long time, which just, sucks the life out of you. And but it's incredibly difficult to sustain. But all three of those teams were able to do it.
Couple of housekeeping notes for you, Steve. Personally, with the Olympics being postponed a year, all indications are that Greg Popovich will still be the head coach. And are you intent on remaining on that Olympic staff and being in Tokyo a year from now?
Oh yeah, no doubt. I'm really excited about that, and I've spoken with Pop several times over the last few weeks, and we'll just wait and see how everything plays out.
The other thing, and we've done this, in NBC Sports Bay Area, 95.7, and a lot of Warriors.com stuff, is we don't normally, in the middle of 7 straight playoff years and 5 trips to the finals, have every chance or any chance to breathe for a second and think about how special different moments and games and victories and runs were. But there's been a lot of rewatching of all these games and re-airing of all these games. And I sat with my kids and watched Game 3 of New Orleans, 20-point comeback in the fourth quarter. They don't foul. Steph hits a 3. The Warriors win in overtime. And watching some of these games again, Clay's 37-point quarter, Clay's 60-point game, Steph's 13 threes, Clay's 14 threes. It reminds you of all the accomplishments, all the great things the Warriors have done. Are there anything that you've had just a chance to decompress for a second and go, that game or this play or this season or just something that, wow, that really, and all the things you've been a part of, the Warrior memories, give me a couple that may jump to the forefront a little bit that the fans might not be aware of for you personally.
Well, the Clay game will always stand out. I mean, that was like a religious experience. I mean, it was, I've never seen anything like it. I don't think I ever will again. I think every fan who was there would tell you the same thing. It was beyond belief. And it was not just the ball going in over and over. It was the emotional connection between every human being in that arena and what was happening on the floor. It was incredible. So that game will always stand out. One of the games that I would love to see, and I've been down here in San Diego. We don't get the Warriors games down here. We have different regional sports networks. So I'm disappointed because I'm dying to watch some of those games. But there's one game in particular that stands out for me that I'd love to see. And it's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle because it's, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a huge game, but it seemed like it at the time. It was 2016 when the Spurs were about a game behind us. We were both, we won 73, they won 67, I think, that year. And just after the All-Star break, they came to Oakland, and they were a game or two behind us. It was, I think the best cumulative record of any two teams meeting in NBA history after the All-Star break. Both teams were just destroying the league, and it was one of our best games of the season. We absolutely put on one of our best performances of the year, and that's when it was really sort of like, all right, this is real. This team's for real. Yeah, and that game was. I'd love to see that one again. That was us at our very best.
Yeah, the thing I always think of, and the New Orleans game reminded me of, the potency for comeback potential of this run of Warriors. Down 20 in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, no problem. I think of the Toronto regular season game. Down 27 with a minute left in the third, win by 12. I mean, to see a game flip 40-something points and have Oracle, levitate and turn on its side, like, it's a couple threes and then that stifling defense and these 17-1 runs. It's just a magic that the team has had that I think, you've been able to ride and instill, that the Warriors are never out of a game. Even the Houston series where you're down double digits at halftime of playoff games and still somehow overcome those to win those games. I don't know if I've ever seen a team like that. You say, how do they even get behind those numbers? But they're never out of a game. And I think for a broadcaster, it's super fun because the comebacks are almost beyond description. And what's that like to be on the sideline when it's like, we're down 22, but here the engine's humming here. Here comes the run that nobody's ready for.
Well, you knew it was always a possibility because of our three-point shooting and because of the unique capabilities of Steph and Clay offensively, and then our defensive teams. That just the ability to make 4 or 5 stops in a row. Draymond, doing his thing, and Andre and Andrew Bogut back when, and so that combination of incredible defense and really potent offense made it so that we were always capable of making those big comebacks, and that was really fun. And then I think the other thing that stands out to me that will probably be a record that's never broken is we went like 130 something games without losing 2 in a row, and I think we broke the record by 40 or 50 games or something. Raymond would know. We'll ask Raymond later, but that was special to see a team in the NBA go almost 2 full seasons without losing 2 games in a row. It's virtually impossible given the rigors of the NBA season and just the ball bouncing the wrong way. I think that's an incredible stat.
All right. So when they do the 30 for 30 on the Warriors, 20 years from now, and we talk about the next chapter of this run, I'm giving you 2 things right now that when I'm interviewed, I'm telling people secretly about Steve Kerr. So one of them is after the first championship, we were getting taken back to the facility, and it's Rick Barry and Marshawn Lynch and Larry Riley, and you and I were sitting in this one area. And I said, Steve, you did a nice job on stage. And you looked over and you said, well, I am the only one with parade experience. And I thought, okay, that's the side of Steve Kerr we don't see enough of. I mean, to me, that was a really good one. And then also the 24-0 start, which unfortunately you had your illness, but Luke Walton and the team kind of banded together as kind of an homage to you. Finally ends in Milwaukee. Thank you, League, for Boston, Milwaukee back-to-back for some reason after the overtime win in Boston to go 24-0. And we're in the locker room and everybody calls you. And the first thing you say to Luke is, 24-1? What's going on here? What's with the 24-1? It's just, those 2 things stick out in that I think people see the fiery side of you, the cerebral side, but there's like the nice little, impish jab, intellectual, humor that you interject at just the right moments that I think people need to appreciate. So I'm outing you on both of those moments because those are 2 of my favorite Steve Kerr moments.
Well, I appreciate it. That's I'll take the compliment. One thing I've learned, the only way to get through the NBA season is with some humor. And we got a lot of funny players on our team, funny coaches. We enjoy each other's company, and probably the thing I miss more than anything right now, to be honest, is just going to the gym every day and being around all the people in our organization. So we're going to get through it, and everybody's just got to stay patient and stay positive and be smart, listen to the experts. But I am dreaming of that day when we all go back to work, when we go back to Chase and playing a game with 18,000 fans, and when we get back to normal life and we're able to experience those things again, it's going to be glorious. And we just got to be patient, and we'll get there.
All right, Steve, perfect way to end it. We know where to find you in terms of the home camera, but thanks for taking the time.
Sure. Thanks, Fitzy. Enjoyed it.